I slapped the Mafia boss in public for disrespecting my friend. He smiled and said, "Finally, someone real." The smell of burnt sugar and stale coffee clung to my uniform, a familiar comfort and a constant reminder that another Saturday night shift at the daily grind was grinding to a close. My feet ached, a dull throb that had been building since lunchtime, but the tips Ava had handed me after her last table made it all worth it. Ava, my best friend, was clearing the final glasses from the bar. Her normally bright smile looked pinched tonight. Her debt to Lorenzo Rossi cast a shadow over both our lives, not just hers. Every extra shift I picked up, every dollar I squirreled away, it was all for her. My own dreams of a small, quiet life where I could make my own choices and not feel like I was always scrambling felt miles away. But Ava was family, and family came first. "You okay?" I asked, wiping down a sticky tabletop, the synthetic cleaner stinging my nostrils. The restaurant was emptying out, leaving behind a scattering of crumbs and forgotten napkins. Ava sighed, polishing a wine glass with furious intensity. "Just tired, Lily. Really tired of feeling like I'm walking on eggshells. He called again this morning." She didn't need to say who. The name Rossi hung in the air, heavy and dark. Said he needed to see me tonight in person. A chill snaked up my spine. Despite the warm, stuffy air of the restaurant, Lorenzo Rossi didn't call people. He sent messages, usually through hulking men in expensive suits, and he certainly didn't meet people in person, not without a very specific, usually unpleasant reason. My stomach tightened. This wasn't good. Just as I was about to ask for more details, the front door chimed, announcing a late arrival. I glanced up, my heart stuttering. 3 men stood in the doorway, radiating undeniable, dangerous energy. 2 were built like brick walls, dressed in sharp, dark suits that probably cost more than my entire apartment's rent. The third, though, was the one who drew every eye. He wasn't just handsome. He was something else entirely. Tall, with lean, coiled power in his posture, and a face carved from ancient stone. Sharp angles and unforgiving planes. His hair was slicked back, dark as obsidian, and his tailored suit seemed to ripple with silent menace. It was Lorenzo Rossi, unmistakable. He scanned the nearly empty restaurant, his gaze sweeping over the tables, dismissive and cold, until it landed on Ava. A flicker, almost imperceptible, passed through his expression. Not recognition, but a decision. He started toward her, his movements fluid and predatory, like a hunter sizing up prey. The 2 bodyguards fanned out, creating an impenetrable barrier between him and the rest of the world. Ava dropped the glass she was polishing. It didn't shatter, just bounced off the rubber mat behind the bar with a muffled thud. Her face had gone completely pale, freckles stark against her skin. She looked like she'd seen a ghost, or worse, a devil. A wave of protectiveness, hot and fierce, surged through me. My hands clenched around the damp rag. Lorenzo stopped directly in front of Ava, his presence suffocating the air around her. He didn't speak for a long moment, just looked at her. The sheer disdain in his eyes was a physical blow, the kind that made you feel like dirt, utterly insignificant. It boiled my blood. My fear for Ava momentarily eclipsed my own terror. "Ava Bianchi," he said, his voice a low rumble, surprisingly smooth, yet edged with steel. It wasn't loud, but it cut through the quiet restaurant like a knife. "I believe we have an outstanding matter to discuss." Ava swallowed hard, her gaze darting, searching for an escape that wasn't there. She clasped her hands, twisting them. "Mr. Rossi, I'm so sorry. I've been trying to get it together. I just need a little more time." Her voice was thin, greedy, barely a whisper. She sounded small, helpless, and that was the thing that finally broke my self-control. I remembered Ava's mother years ago, working herself to the bone, exploited by a landlord who kept raising the rent. I remembered the helplessness, the way my own mother had fought for her, only to be dismissed. I remembered how powerless I'd felt then, watching injustice happen and being too young, too small to do anything about it. I wasn't that girl anymore. Lorenzo Rossi chuckled, a sound devoid of humor, dry and rasping. He reached into his inner jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet pouch. He didn't open it immediately, letting it dangle by a silver cord just out of Ava's reach. The air crackled with tension. The scent of expensive cologne, sharp and alien, filled my senses. My knuckles were white. "Time, Miss Bianchi, is a luxury you no longer possess," he said. His eyes, the color of a stormy winter sky, held no warmth. Then, with a flick of his wrist, he opened the pouch and let its contents spill onto the polished bar. They weren't coins or bills. They were small, glittering stones, perfectly cut diamonds that caught the low light and scattered it into 1,000 tiny sparks. They lay there, a vulgar display, mocking Ava's struggle. "This," he continued, gesturing with a long, elegant finger, "is the value of your debt in full." He paused, letting the casual wealth sink in. The manager, a beefy man named Frank, had emerged from the back, face slack with fear, but he wisely kept his distance. Then Lorenzo's lips curved into a slow, chilling smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Consider it a severance package, Ava. You're done here. Consider your debt paid. You're free." Ava's head snapped up, eyes wide with confusion, then dawning relief. "Really? But how?" "My generosity has its limits and its demands," he said, his gaze flicking toward me for the barest fraction of a second before returning to Ava. "You will not work in this city again, not in any establishment I or my associates frequent. You will leave tonight and you will not contact anyone from your past." His words struck me like a physical blow. He wasn't freeing her. He was exiling her, stripping her of her livelihood, her friends, her entire life just because she owed him money. He was humiliating her, breaking her, reducing her to nothing. And then, as if to underscore his power, he swept his hand across the bar, sending the glittering diamonds clattering across the floor like worthless pebbles. A deep, visceral anger exploded inside me. It wasn't a thought, not a decision. It was instinct, a raw, burning need to strike back, to defend Ava against this callous display of power, this cruel injustice. This man with his cold eyes and expensive suit thought he could shatter someone's life and walk away without consequence. My hand flew through the air before my brain registered the action. The sound was sharp, resonant, a crack that echoed in the sudden, stunned silence. My palm stung, a burning sensation vibrating up my arm. Lorenzo Rossi's head snapped to the side, his cheekbone reddening almost immediately. His expensive cologne mingled with the metallic tang of ozone in the air. For a split second, a profound, almost supernatural silence fell. Even the bodyguards froze, eyes widening in disbelief, hands hovering near their jackets. My breath hitched, a tiny ragged sound. The world narrowed until only Lorenzo and I existed. His face, so cold in impassive moments before, now held an expression I couldn't decipher. Shock, yes, but something else. Something intense and unnerving. He turned his head slowly, storm cloud eyes sweeping over my face. It wasn't anger, not immediately. It was something far more chilling, intense, analytical curiosity. His gaze pinned me in place. A tremor ran down my spine, a cold knot forming in my stomach. The sting in my palm was nothing compared to the sudden, overwhelming realization of what I had just done. I had slapped Lorenzo Rossi, a faint, almost imperceptible smile, utterly devoid of warmth, spread across his lips. A predator's smile, chilling me to the bone. He raised a hand slowly, deliberately, and touched his reddened cheek, fingers brushing the mark I'd left. The movement was so calm, so measured, it felt infinitely more menacing than if he had roared in fury. The fear, bone deep and ice cold, finally hit me. My initial outrage burned itself out, leaving terrible clarity. I had just attacked the most dangerous man in the city. Ava's future, my own future, perhaps even our lives, had just been irrevocably altered by my impulsive act. A wave of nausea washed over me. My knees felt weak, but beneath the terror, a strange, exhilarating current began to flow, a wild, defiant thrill. I had done it. I had stood up to him. I had made him feel something, even if only the sting of my hand. I met his gaze, chin lifting instinctively, a stubborn spark igniting inside me. "Finally," he said, his voice a low, gravelly whisper that seemed to vibrate through the floorboards. His eyes, still locked on mine, held unnerving intensity, as if he were seeing me for the very first time. Someone real. His words, cryptic and chilling, made no sense, yet resonated with disturbing weight. Someone real. I wanted to scream, to run, to rewind the last 5 minutes and pretend none of this had happened, but I couldn't. I just stood there, chest heaving, listening to the frantic drumbeat of my pulse. The air was thick with unspoken threats and a dangerous, unforeseen connection that had just been forged between us. The bodyguards, finally shaking off their stupor, moved not toward me, but to flank Lorenzo, expressions grim. One spoke into a discreet mic tucked into his cuff, voice a low murmur. Lorenzo, however, didn't avert his gaze from me, not even for a second. His eyes were a physical force, pressing down, demanding. "Clean this up," he said, still looking at me, voice carrying just enough to reach Frank, who was now cowering behind the bar. "Everything. And tell Miss Bianchi to be gone by morning." He turned then, movement slow and deliberate, finally releasing my gaze. He didn't say another word. He simply walked out of the daily grind, bodyguards in sync, the door chime a soft, mocking farewell. The restaurant erupted into hushed whispers and urgent movements. Frank was shouting, Ava was crying, and the few remaining customers scrambled for the door, eyes wide with horror and morbid fascination. "Lily, what did you do?" Ava wailed, rushing over, hands grabbing my arms. Her tears were hot against my skin. That was Lorenzo Rossi. He's going to... She dissolved into fresh sobs. Frank was less sympathetic. "Get out, Lily, both of you. This place is compromised. I can't believe you." His face was mottled red, a mixture of fear and fury. He was right. There was no way I could stay. No way Ava could stay. My mind was a blur of fragmented thoughts. Someone real. The way he'd looked at me. Not with anger, but with something unsettlingly like interest. A flicker of awareness that he saw something in me beyond a simple waitress. It was terrifying, and yes, exhilarating in a twisted way. That defiance, that instinct to protect, had put me squarely in his sights. "Ava," I said, voice surprisingly steady despite the tremor in my hands. I gripped her shoulders, forcing her to meet my eyes. "We need to go now." We stumbled out of the daily grind into the cool night air, leaving behind the chaos and the lingering scent of burnt sugar. Streetlights cast long, distorted shadows that seemed to stretch and twist like something alive. Ava clung to me, sobbing quietly while I walked on autopilot, senses heightened, every shadow hiding a threat. We returned to our tiny apartment. The place felt suddenly exposed, vulnerable. Ava immediately started packing a small bag, movements frantic. "I have to leave, Lily. Tonight, I have to go." Her voice was laced with desperate fear I'd never heard from her before. I watched her, a hollow ache growing in my chest. This was my fault. My reckless impulsiveness had driven her away from her life, her home. But what choice did I have? I couldn't let him do that to her, not after everything. "Where will you go?" I asked, though I already knew. She had family in another state, a distant aunt she rarely spoke to. "It doesn't matter," she sniffled, pulling a faded hoodie from her dresser. "Anywhere but here. Anywhere but where he is." She paused, eyes red-rimmed and filled with a desperate plea. "Please, Lily, you have to be careful. He's not like other people." I hugged her tight, the rough fabric of her hoodie scratching my cheek. "I know. I'll be fine. Just go. And let me know when you get there." The words felt hollow, a lie to soothe us both. Fine was the last thing I was. After Ava left, the apartment felt impossibly large, echoing with silence that pressed down on me. I tried to clean, to distract myself, wiping already spotless countertops, running my hand over the rough weave of the sofa fabric, but my mind kept replaying the scene. The crack of my palm, the way Lorenzo Rossi's head had snapped back, the unnerving intensity in his eyes, someone real. I showered, trying to wash away the tension, the metallic scent of fear and anger. The hot water stung my still tender palm. When I stepped out, wrapped in my oldest, softest towel, the world outside my window seemed calmer, almost normal. A car passed, headlights briefly illuminating the dusty street. But inside me, a storm was brewing. My phone, left charging on the nightstand, buzzed. A text message. My heart lurched painfully. It wasn't Ava. The number was unfamiliar. I unlocked the screen, fingers trembling slightly. The message was short, direct, written in formal, almost archaic style. Ms. Vance, your presence is requested at the Rossi Estate, 1421 Belladonna Way, tomorrow at 7 p.m. sharp. We have Ava Bianchi's debt to discuss. Your prompt arrival will ensure Miss Bianchi's continued freedom. Failure to attend will unfortunately result in dire consequences for your friend. Do not be late. L.R. My breath hitched, a cold knot forming in my throat. He wasn't done. He was just getting started. He hadn't retaliated physically. He'd found a more insidious way to ensnare me, using the one thing he knew I cared about most, Ava. He knew my weakness and was exploiting it, drawing me into his web, demanding my presence. There was no escape, not if I wanted Ava truly free. I stared at the message, words burning into my retinas, chilling certainty settling in my bones. I had to go. I had no choice. The next evening. The old digital clock on my nightstand glowed 6:17 p.m., red numbers stark against the fading light outside my window. My hands felt clammy, nervous sweat prickling my palms as I stared at my reflection. What did one wear to meet a Mafia boss who held your best friend's future hostage? Definitely not my stained daily grind uniform. I'd settled on a simple dark blue dress. Nothing fancy, just a clean, modest cut that felt like a shield. A thrift store find I usually saved for job interviews that never panned out. The rough fabric felt oddly comforting against my skin, a small anchor in the storm brewing inside me. The air in the apartment was still, heavy with Ava's absence. It smelled faintly of her lavender laundry detergent and last night's stale pizza. My mind replayed LR's message, the formal, chilling words echoing. Your prompt arrival will ensure Miss Bianchi's continued freedom. He knew exactly how to twist the knife. I pulled my hair into a tight ponytail, trying to project composure I didn't feel. My reflection stared back, eyes wide, a little too bright, but holding a stubborn defiance. That spark, though terrifying, was the only thing keeping me from crumpling. I wasn't going to beg. I'd negotiate. I'd find a way to protect Ava without losing myself, or at least I hoped I would. A sleek black SUV, silent as a shadow, pulled up at exactly 6:45 p.m. Tinted windows reflected streetlights like dark mirrors. My throat tightened as I walked out of the building. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of rain that hadn't fallen. The driver, a hulking man in a dark suit with a blank, unreadable face, opened the back door without a word. Sliding into the plush leather seat felt like stepping into another world. The interior smelled faintly of expensive cologne and polished steel. My fingers pressed against the smooth, cool leather, a stark contrast to the worn fabric of my sofa. The car moved off seamlessly. No sudden jerks, no engine roar, just a smooth glide through the city. Familiar cityscape melted away, replaced by grander homes, then winding tree-lined roads leading to places I'd only seen in magazines. This wasn't just a rich neighborhood, it was an empire. The Rossi estate loomed into view, a monolithic structure of dark stone and gleaming glass set against ancient towering trees. Not a mansion, a fortress radiating power and menacing opulence. High walls topped with intricate ironwork stretched endlessly. Security cameras, subtle but omnipresent, tracked our every move. The air outside felt colder, thinner despite the engine's warmth. A shiver ran down my spine, unrelated to temperature. We passed through an imposing gate that slid open without a sound, then continued up a long, winding driveway flanked by perfectly manicured lawns. The silence inside the car was deafening, amplifying my frantic heartbeat. I took a deep breath, trying to conjure that stubborn spark of defiance. This wasn't just for Ava, it was for me, to prove I wasn't a pawn. The SUV stopped before massive oak doors, grand, imposing, a testament to old money and unyielding power. The driver opened my door. I stepped onto a gravel path that crunched softly under my worn heels. The night air was fresh, carrying damp soil and distant pines, a small, grounding detail in an overwhelming environment. My dress, though clean, suddenly felt inadequate, cheap. As I stood dwarfed by the building's scale, the immense doors swung inward, revealing a cavernous entry hall designed to impress and intimidate. Gleaming marble floors reflected light from an enormous crystal chandelier. The air was cool, dry, scented with old wood polish and dried rosemary. 2 more suited men stood guard inside, equally imposing, equally silent. I swallowed hard, mouth suddenly dry. "This way, Miss Vance." A new voice, surprisingly gentle yet firm, broke the silence. A woman in a tailored black suit stepped forward from the shadows. Severe, no-nonsense bob, eyes that missed nothing. She didn't smile. No one here smiled. I nodded, voice stuck in my throat. My heels clicked against marble, echoing ominously as I followed her through a maze of ornate corridors lined with heavy tapestries and dark antique furniture. Beautiful, undeniably, but cold, impersonal. My fingers brushed silk wall covering, a desperate attempt to connect with something tangible. Finally, she stopped before a large carved wooden door. She didn't knock. She opened it, stepped aside, and gestured me in. "Mr. Rossi will see you now." I walked into a study, or perhaps a library. The room was immense, lined floor to ceiling with leather-bound books. The rich, earthy scent of old paper and wood filled the air, a familiar comfort that momentarily eased the tension in my chest. A large ornate desk dominated the center. Behind it, silhouetted against a tall window overlooking a moonlit garden, sat Lorenzo Rossi. He didn't look up immediately. He was signing a document, head bent, lamplight casting deep shadows on sharp features. He looked different tonight, less overtly predatory, more contained. His suit was impeccable, but he exuded quiet, scholarly intensity. He could have been any powerful executive, if you ignored the palpable aura of danger clinging to him like a second skin. My eyes lingered on the faint red mark still visible on his cheekbone, a ghostly reminder of my impulsive act. A tiny spark of satisfaction flickered, quickly extinguished by fresh fear. After an eternity, he capped his pen with a precise click and raised his head. His eyes, wet slate under lamplight, met mine. No anger, no outward hostility, just that unnerving, analytical curiosity from the restaurant. He didn't smile, but something flickered in their depths, making hairs on my arm stand on end. He gestured to one of 2 plush antique armchairs opposite his desk. "Ms. Vance, please sit." His voice was low, smooth, devoid of discernible emotion. I walked over, movement stiff, and sank into the velvet upholstery, soft, luxurious, but offering no real comfort. The desk between us felt like a chasm, a tangible power imbalance. I laced my fingers, pressing thumbs into knuckles, trying to appear calm. The air crackled with unspoken words. "Tea, coffee, or perhaps something stronger?" he offered, gaze still holding mine. It wasn't hospitable, more a test. He expected refusal to maintain defiant distance. "No, thank you," I said, voice steadier than expected. My throat was scratchy. I longed for water, but asking felt like weakness. He nodded slowly. "Direct. I appreciate that." He leaned back, gaze unwavering, studying me with intensity that made my skin prickle. Let's be direct then. Ava Bianchi is free. Her debt is paid. She is no longer bound to me or my organization. You ensured that. A wave of relief so potent it nearly buckled my knees washed over me. Ava was truly free. My impulsive act, my fear, it had all been worth it. But then the other shoe dropped. However, he continued, voice dropping slightly, that freedom came at a cost, not to Ava, but to you. He paused, letting implications sink in. The scent of aged leather from the books was intoxicating, but couldn't mask growing dread. You struck me, Miss Vance, he said, touching his cheek again, a slow, deliberate gesture, an act of unprecedented defiance. Most would expect retribution, vengeance. My breath hitched. My heart fluttered frantically against my ribs. Here it came. But I am not like most, he continued, a flicker of something unsettling in his eyes. You showed me something I haven't seen in a very long time, something real, a raw, uncalculated courage, a fierce loyalty. He leaned forward, forearms on the desk, hands clasped loosely. And that, Ms. Vance, is a rare commodity, a valuable one. My mind raced, trying to decipher his words. He wasn't angry, he was intrigued, and that was far more terrifying. So, here is my proposal, he said, voice quiet, almost conversational, yet edged with undeniable authority. Ava is free completely. She can go anywhere, do anything. No one will touch her, financially or otherwise, because of her past association with me. That I swear. His gaze was unnervingly sincere, a strange sense of honor contradicting his ruthless reputation. In return, he continued, you will become my personal assistant. You will reside here at the estate. You will work for me directly and solely for as long as I deem necessary. My jaw went slack. Personal assistant? Here with him? The absurdity almost made me laugh, but terror was too profound. No, I managed, the word a small defiant whisper. No, I can't. That's not a deal. That's captivity. A faint, dark amusement curved his lips. Captivity implies you have no choice. You do, Miss Vance. You can refuse. You can walk out that door right now. But if you do... His voice hardened, losing its smooth edge. Then Ava Bianchi's debt will be reactivated with interest, and my word that she will be left alone will be rescinded completely. Her freedom, her safety, will be forfeit. The air was sucked from my lungs. He had me. He knew it. He watched my face, dissecting every flicker of emotion, every tremble of resolve. He was offering a choice, but it was no choice at all, a gilded cage disguised as a deal. You'd truly do that? I asked, voice barely a croak. The irony wasn't lost on me. He was offering to protect Ava by making me his prisoner, twisted, manipulative, and absolutely brilliant in its cruelty. I always honor my promises, Miss Vance, he said, voice flat, both good and bad, and I never forget an insult or a loyalty. You chose to protect her. Now you choose how that protection continues. He leaned back, observing me. Think carefully, Lily. You're clever. You're resourceful. You're real. I believe you understand the gravity of this situation. My name, spoken so casually, intimately, sent a strange jolt through me. It felt like a violation, a claim. My mind raced, weighing impossible options. Ava's safety, her actual freedom, against my own. This wasn't just about me anymore. It hadn't been since that slap. I had to ensure her lasting freedom. That meant I had to stay. I had to enter the cage. What exactly does a personal assistant for Lorenzo Rossi entail? I asked, forcing the words out, trying to regain control. My voice was shaky, but it was there. His lips curved again, this time a genuine, humorless smile. Many things. Managing my schedule, organizing my affairs, perhaps offering a fresh perspective on certain matters. You'll learn. You'll reside here. Your needs will be met, of course. A suite of rooms, personal staff, anything you require, except your freedom to leave. That, Lily, will be mine to grant." A shiver went down my spine. The possessiveness in his tone was chilling, but I hated myself for it. There was a flicker, a tiny hum of dangerous excitement, the thrill of walking a tightrope over a deep chasm. "And when is this arrangement over?" I pushed, voice gaining strength. He looked at me for a long moment, gaze unreadable. "When I decide it is, or," he added, a glint in his eyes almost mischievous, "when you convince me otherwise." That was the loophole, the challenge, the sliver of agency. It wasn't much, but it was enough to latch onto, a way out if I was smart enough, strong enough to find it. "Fine," I said, chin lifting, meeting his gaze squarely. "I'll do it, for Ava. But understand this, Mr. Rossi. I am not some meek little bird you can tame. I don't scare easily and I won't break." His smile widened, a genuinely chilling sight. "Oh, I know, Lily. That's precisely why I want you here. And please, call me Lorenzo." The formality of Lily still felt like a claim. He stood, moving around the desk with effortless grace that belied his size. He stopped beside my chair. The scent of his cologne, bergamot, and something smoky filled my senses. His hand, warm and firm, rested lightly on my shoulder. A proprietary touch, a physical claiming. I tensed, muscles rigid, but I didn't flinch away. I couldn't. "Welcome to your new life, Lily," he said, voice a low rumble close to my ear. "It promises to be enlightening." He released my shoulder. The absence of his touch felt strangely cold. He instructed the silent woman who'd led me in, whose name I still didn't know, to show me to my quarters and ensure I had everything I needed. No tour, no explanation of duties, just everything you need and you'll learn. A deliberate move to keep me off balance, to emphasize his control. As I followed her out, the scent of old books and wood polish receded, replaced by the faint, lingering trace of Lorenzo's cologne. My suite was more like a small apartment. Bedroom, sitting area, opulent bathroom, crisp silk sheets, cool and impossibly soft. Elegant, muted decor, dark wood, plush fabrics, far more luxurious than anything I'd ever experienced. Yet it felt like a prison cell. I walked to the window, pulling aside heavy velvet drapes. Outside, vast estate gardens stretched into moonlit distance. No fence, no obvious barrier, just open space and then distant high walls, an illusion of freedom, a carefully crafted deception. Dinner was served alone in my sitting room by a quiet maid. Formal affair, silver cloches, multiple courses, exquisite food I barely tasted. Roasted chicken and delicate asparagus felt heavy in my mouth. My thoughts oscillated between relief for Ava and simmering resentment for Lorenzo. He saw me as a challenge, a curiosity, a thing to be acquired and studied. And I was, for the moment, trapped. I knew I had to play his game. Watch. Learn. Find my own way out. The days that followed. The personal assistant job wasn't what I'd imagined. Lorenzo didn't have me fetching coffee or organizing dry cleaning. My days revolved around his study, a vast room that smelled perpetually of old books and worn leather. My first task, meticulously catalog his absurdly large collection, running fingers over dusty spines, alphabetizing, noting publication dates, oddly soothing work, a quiet reprieve in a gilded cage. He rarely spoke during these times, working in silence at his massive mahogany desk. The soft click of his pen was the only sound for hours. I'd catch glimpses through peripheral vision, the intensity of his profile, the way his jaw clenched when focused, the subtle frown line between his brows. The constant pressure of his presence was a low hum in the air, bergamot and smoke clinging to rich fabrics. My meals were served in my suite, always exquisite, always alone. The staff moved like ghosts. I never saw Ava's face in local papers or heard whispers of reactivated debt. That was my cold comfort. Ava was safe. and that safety was tethered to my continued presence in this opulent, unsettling world. Silk sheets, plush carpets, the quiet hum of climate control. It was all designed to lull me into submission. It wasn't working. One afternoon, a thick folder landed on my table. My schedule for the upcoming week. Lorenzo's voice cut through the quiet, startlingly close. I hadn't heard him approach. My hand went cold, a tremor running down my arm. He stood beside me, shadow falling over the open book. Cross-reference these appointments with ongoing projects. Highlight conflicts, provide solutions. A test, to see if I could be useful beyond organizing his library, to see if I had the intelligence he'd glimpsed that night at the daily grind. I took a deep breath, scent of old paper filling my lungs. "Okay," I said, voice a little breathless. "I'll do my best." The work was engaging. Required focus, methodical thinking, logistics, skills I'd honed waitressing, juggling orders, predicting rushes. The projects were complex: financial dealings, land acquisitions, personnel reports. I tried not to think what personnel management implied in his world. I focused on practicalities, numbers, cold hard facts. I found minor clashes, a double-booked meeting in the city, overlapping travel. My solutions were simple, direct, logical. I typed them up on the expensive laptop he'd provided, its quiet whir a constant companion. When I presented the printout, his long fingers brushed mine for a brief, unsettling second. My skin tingled. He scanned my notes, gaze intense, then looked up. "You moved my meeting with Mr. Dubois," he stated, voice even but with an underlying current that made my nerves hum. That was a delicate negotiation, a priority. My throat felt dry. Light from the window caught subtle silver threads in his slicked-back hair. "Yes, I saw," I replied, forcing eye contact. "But it conflicted with the asset appraisal in Monaco. That's a larger sum, and your presence is listed as critical for both." I paused, chewing the inside of my lip. My thought was that Mr. Dubois's negotiation could be handled by an associate with a clear mandate. The appraisal needs you there, especially with current market volatility. The financial benefit is significantly higher. The air felt thinner, charged. I braced for cold dismissal, or worse, anger. Instead, a slow, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. Not warm, but not predatory. Acknowledgement. "Intriguing," he murmured, eyes lingering on mine. Most would not have dared to prioritize or question. He paused, then nodded. "Execute the change. Send Dubois a message. I regret the inconvenience, but unforeseen developments require my personal attention elsewhere." That was the start. I found my footing, not as a defiant captive, but as a genuinely useful, deeply uncomfortable addition to his world. Slowly, subtly, I inserted my own moral compass into his ruthless strategies. Not always successful, sometimes barely a suggestion, a nuance in phrasing, a recommendation for a less aggressive approach. I learned to choose my battles. Like the time he contemplated a hostile takeover of a small family-owned shipping company that owed him a minor sum. He saw leverage, expansion. I saw generations of hard work destroyed, innocent people losing livelihoods. "It's not just about the numbers, Lorenzo," I ventured late one evening, leaning against his polished desk, scent of expensive ink in the air. We were alone, the mansion quiet. "There's a goodwill factor. Public perception, even in your world, has value. A small investment in their operations, a loan, an alliance. It could net you loyalty, a reliable partner, rather than a forced acquisition that makes enemies and leaves a bitter taste." He listened, gaze unreadable, lamplight reflecting in eyes the color of polished riverstone. He didn't dismiss it. He stared at me, then back at the dossier, thoughtful. The next day, he made a phone call in Italian, tone definitive. Later, a new report, a strategic alliance. The company remained family-owned but loyal to Rossi. It wasn't a full victory, not a moral triumph, but a step, a tiny crack in his impenetrable wall, a hint he could be swayed by something other than cold profit. I felt strange satisfaction and fragile hope. I started to see the man beneath the monster, incredibly intelligent, mind working at a furious pace I could barely match, relentlessly driven, consumed by his empire. Sometimes late at night in the quiet study, I'd see fleeting weariness in his eyes, a loneliness that resonated with my own isolation. The air would carry a faint whisper of sadness, like a draft through a grand, empty hall. It was disturbing, this growing empathy, this unwanted glimpse into hidden vulnerabilities. The threat escalates. Then the quiet hum of the estate shifted. Small things. A car passing too slowly outside the gates, engine a low thrum, a security camera glitching, a phone call Lorenzo took in a hushed, intense tone, voice rough around the edges, frustration palpable. He became more watchful, gaze sweeping grounds with predatory alertness. He spent more time in the security room, profile etched with quiet tension. "We have unwelcome attention," he stated one evening, dropping a newspaper on my desk. The headline was innocuous, a local business story, but his finger pointed to a blurred license plate in the background photo. A rival faction. They've been probing. My heart lurched. The air went cold. Probing for what? Weakness, opportunity. His eyes, wet slate, fixed on mine. "And your presence here, it's a new variable, an unknown element. Some may see it as vulnerability." A sharp understanding pierced me. He wasn't just observing me. He was using me as a shield or bait. The thought was sickening. The next day, walking through the manicured rose gardens to clear my head, scent of damp earth and budding roses filling the air, I heard a sharp crack in the distance, a gunshot. My breath hitched, every muscle tensed. My head snapped toward the tree line. Nothing. Before I could process, a strong hand gripped my arm, pulling me backward with surprising force. Lorenzo. He'd appeared from nowhere, face grim, grip firm, almost bruising. He didn't speak, just dragged me, half running, back to the main house. What was that?" I stammered, heart racing, crisp air thin in my lungs. "A warning shot," he ground out, jaw tight. "They're escalating. They want my attention, and they think you're the way to get it." We burst into the study, heavy oak door slamming behind us with a resounding thud. The scent of old books felt like comfort in chaos. He released my arm, turning to face me, eyes blazing with intensity I hadn't seen before. "From now on," he commanded, voice raw, "you do not leave my sight. You will not step outside this house without an escort, and you will not, under any circumstances, ignore my instructions." His words were harsh, but beneath them I detected a tremor, deep, almost desperate concern. He wasn't just giving orders, he was trying to protect me. The realization sent a confusing jolt through my chest. Days turned suffocating. I was confined to the house, always aware of his presence or his men's. The air was thick with unspoken tension, fear mingling with expensive cologne. I moved through lavish rooms like a ghost, soft carpet muffling steps, hushed staff conversations, distant whispers. Lorenzo was constantly on edge, pacing, taking urgent calls, eyes scanning every window. He was under immense pressure, and I was the reason. My resentment began to fray, replaced by strange, unwelcome concern. He wasn't just a manipulator. He was a man shouldering an empire, constantly under threat, isolated, exposed, and now, because of me, even more so. I found myself watching him, empathy overriding hatred, seeing deep stress lines around his mouth, the way he instinctively glanced at me when a phone rang. I realized with a sickening lurch that I was starting to care about him. The thought was terrifying, illicit, deeply confusing. The storm won. Stormy evening, rain lashing windows. A sudden power surge caused the study lights to flicker, then die. The room plunged into near darkness, illuminated only by faint city glow through tall windows. A collective gasp rippled through the air. The electrical hum of the house died. My breath hitched. As I fumbled for my phone, a strong, warm hand closed around my wrist. Lorenzo was suddenly beside me, pulling me close, shielding me with his body. I felt the hard planes of his chest against my back, the solid wall of his presence. Bergamot, rain, and sudden chill from the window filled my senses. The air crackled. "Stay still," he murmured, voice a deep rumble against my ear. His breath ghosted over my temple, sending a shiver down my spine. The power returned moments later, lights flickering to life, but he didn't release me immediately. We stood pressed together, tension palpable. Silence stretched, thick and heavy. He slowly turned, grip still on my wrist, bringing me to face him. His storm cloud eyes searched mine, raw intensity, vulnerability stripped bare by sudden danger. "Are you all right?" he asked, voice rough. My gaze drifted to his lips, slightly parted, then back to his eyes. My throat was scratchy. I could feel heat radiating from him, the subtle texture of his suit against my dress. "Yes," I whispered, voice barely audible. The air was thick with unspoken things. He was so close. I could feel the soft rasp of his breath against my cheek. My gaze dropped again, drawn to his mouth. My body felt heavy, rooted, yet strangely light, floating. Every cell was acutely aware of him. I wanted to lean in. I wanted to pull away. His thumb stroked the skin of my wrist. Just a single soft touch, but it sent electricity straight through me. I instinctively leaned closer, drawn by magnetic pull. He mirrored the movement, head tilting, eyes never leaving mine. His gaze felt like a physical caress, tracing my lips. My heart went cold, then burned with fire unrelated to anger. His face was inches from mine. I could see tiny flecks of gold in his eyes, slight stubble along his jawline. His scent, bergamot, smoke, something distinctly him, flooded my senses, clouding judgment. He was going to kiss me. Every instinct screamed danger, but a deeper, primal part yearned for it, for the illicit connection, the release of pent-up tension. Just as his lips were about to meet mine, a sharp rap on the door broke the spell. We froze, collective intake of breath. He pulled back slowly, hand dropping from my wrist, abrupt absence like a sudden drop, leaving me reeling. His eyes still held raw vulnerability. He cleared his throat, ran a hand through perfectly styled hair. "Enter," he commanded, voice returning to controlled cadence, though a slight tremor softened its edge. A security man stepped in, concern flashing in his eyes. "Apologies, Mr. Rossi. We found a cut wire to the main power conduit. They wanted to test our backup systems and disrupt communications." He glanced at me quickly. Lorenzo's jaw tightened. "Understood. Increase perimeter patrols. Double the watch on Miss Vance's movements. No one comes within 50 feet of this house without authorization." The man nodded and left, door left ajar. Faint voices carrying down the hall. Lorenzo turned back to me. His expression shuddered once more, vulnerability gone, replaced by familiar, controlled mask. "This is what I meant, Lily," he said quietly, seriously. "They're circling, and they're not afraid to be creative." But the words felt hollow. The air still hummed with the ghost of the almost kiss, the knowledge of what had nearly happened. My blood still thrummed with dangerous energy. The kidnapping. A few days later, Lorenzo decided a change of pace was needed. He'd been working intensely, barely sleeping, strain etched onto his face. The tension in the house was suffocating. Then it happened. The jarring jolt of a van hitting a pothole sent fresh pain through my throbbing head. My wrists, chafed raw, were bound tightly with coarse rope. A rough gag bit into my mouth, leaving a metallic taste. I was blindfolded, blackness behind my eyelids heavier than cloth. The air was cold, damp, smelling of exhaust fumes and stale cigarettes. My heart raced, a frantic drumbeat against my ribs. I tried to ground myself, the rough texture of the van floor scraping my cheek, muffled engine thrum, distant city traffic fading to rural quiet. My captors, two burly men whose faces I'd barely glimpsed, hadn't spoken since throwing me in. Their silence was more unnerving than threats. Cold, professional ruthlessness. Fear coiled in my gut. But beneath it, a defiant spark flickered. "Lily, stay sharp." Thoughts of Lorenzo, unwelcome yet oddly comforting, swam through the haze. What would he do? The thought of his rage, cold and precise, was almost a physical presence in the claustrophobic space. He would come for me. I knew it. That almost kiss, the raw vulnerability during the blackout, the possessiveness in his voice, it had solidified something dangerous and undeniable between us. He wouldn't let them win. Suddenly, the van lurched violently, throwing me sideways against cold metal. A crash, shouts, squeal of tires. My stomach dropped. The back doors burst open. Blinding light, sharp scent of gunpowder. Shouts, harsh and guttural. A terrifying symphony of violence. My breath hitched. This wasn't negotiation, this was battle. Hands, strong, purposeful, ripped blindfold and gag from my face, tearing skin. My eyes stung, adjusting. We were in an abandoned warehouse, concrete floors slick with water, rusted beams disappearing into gloom. My captors were engaged, firing at shadows, faces contorted in furious concentration. Then I saw him, Lorenzo. He moved with brutal, mesmerizing efficiency, a dark force against muted light. He wasn't alone. His men were a blur of coordinated violence, taking down my captors with swift, deadly precision. He wore a dark tactical vest over his tailored shirt, a stark contrast to elegant suits, and a sidearm holstered at his hip. Burning gunpowder was acrid, mixing with metallic fear and his familiar cologne. His eyes, stormy winter sky, zeroed in on me across the chaos. For a split second, violence melted away. Only his gaze existed, raw, desperate relief mixed with terrifying, absolute fury. Jaw clenched, muscle jumping in his cheek, lips a thin white line. He was coming. He wove through the skirmish, propelled by invisible force, dispatched a lingering threat with a single brutal strike without breaking stride. The speed and power of him were breathtaking, terrifying. He wasn't just a man, he was a force of nature unleashed. My heart hammered. He knelt before me, hands going immediately to the ropes. Strong, calloused fingers worked quickly, slicing bonds with a small, sharp knife. Rough rope fell away, leaving angry red marks. His touch was firm, yet surprisingly gentle as he checked my arms, gaze sweeping scrapes and bruises. "Lily," he breathed, voice a low, guttural rumble laced with profound emotion. "Are you hurt?" My throat was thick. I shook my head, eyes burning. "I'm okay," I croaked, words scratchy. His hands cupped my face, thumb stroking gently along cheekbones. His eyes, usually guarded, were completely open, revealing terrifying depth of fear and fierce, possessive love. His scent mingled with gunpowder, grounding me. "No," he said, voice flat but trembling faintly. "You are not okay, but you will be." He didn't wait for a response. He scooped me into his arms, lifting me effortlessly. I wrapped my arms around his neck, burying my face against his shoulder. His damp suit jacket smelled of warehouse and bergamot smoky leather. The hard planes of his chest offered surprising comfort. He carried me out of the danger zone, his men forming a protective wall. The sounds of fighting faded as we moved toward a waiting black SUV, sleek, polished, contrasting the gritty warehouse. Sliding into plush leather felt like falling into a cloud. I was shivering, adrenaline, lingering terror. Lorenzo sat beside me, pulling me closer, arm a solid, reassuring weight around my shoulders. He didn't speak, just held me, chin resting lightly on my hair. I felt subtle vibrations of his chest, slow, steady beat of his heart, a silent comfort, a profound declaration. Back at the estate, we were rushed inside through a discreet side entrance. The air smelled of beeswax and expensive flowers, a stark contrast to industrial stench. A small medical team checked me over in a private, sterile room. Lorenzo never left my side. watching with predatory vigilance, jaw tight, eyes polished river stones. He asked precise questions, demanding thoroughness, concern palpable. When they cleaned wrist cuts, I winced. His hand immediately went to my arm, thumb stroking gently. It wasn't the powerful boss I saw, but a man profoundly shaken, fiercely protective. Later, wrapped in a plush robe in my suite, sipping ginger-scented tea, I processed. Lorenzo sat opposite, expression etched with barely contained fury. He'd changed into a fresh suit, but dark intensity remained. He looked exhausted, faint lines around eyes more pronounced. "They underestimated me," he stated, voice quiet, devoid of usual silky control, raw edge. "They thought by taking you they could weaken me, make me vulnerable." His fist clenched on his knee. "They made a grave mistake." The air crackled with suppressed rage. I could still smell faint gunpowder on him. "What will you do?" I asked, voice shaky but gaining strength, fingers tightening around warm teacup. He looked at me, gaze unwavering. For a long moment he didn't speak, weighing words or grappling with emotions beneath stoic exterior. "I will dismantle them," he finally said, voice low and deadly serious. "Every last one. They will regret the day they thought to touch what is mine." The word mine resonated deep within, possessive, absolute. It should have frightened me. Part of me recoiled, but another part, the part that had witnessed his unwavering devotion, his brutal efficiency in protecting me, found strange, dark comfort. He saw me as his, and he would move heaven and earth to protect his. Over the next days, I saw the full, terrifying extent of Lorenzo's power. He orchestrated a rapid, decisive strike against the rival faction. The estate became a hub of intense activity, hushed, urgent phone calls, men coming and going with grim determination. I heard snippets, asset forfeiture, territory acquisition, elimination. It was brutal, ruthless, absolute. But I also saw a subtle shift. When a lieutenant suggested retaliatory strikes against rivals' family members, a cruel standard practice, Lorenzo's eyes hardened with different fury. "No," he commanded, voice sharp with new authority. "We do not touch families. We target leadership, operations, assets, those who chose this life." I recognized my own words in his command, the subtle seeds of goodwill and integrity I'd planted during late-night study talks. He hadn't just rescued me, he'd listened. He was enacting my influence, making a public strategic shift in operational style. It wasn't sudden conversion, but a calculated pivot, a new standard born of my presence. Still dark, still ruthless, but carrying a faint, unsettling echo of my moral compass, a brutal form of justice, but not senseless destruction. The faction was dismantled within a week, leadership neutralized, operations absorbed or eradicated. The threat was gone. The silence that fell over the estate was different, secure. I walked through the gardens again, scent of fresh-cut grass and damp earth filling the air. This time, no tremor in my step. The confession. That evening, Lorenzo came to my suite. Soft lamplight cast long shadows, making the familiar space feel intimate, charged. He stood in the doorway, framed by dark wood, shoulders broader, posture subtly changed, less burdened, but still carrying quiet intensity. "May I come in, Lily?" he asked, voice softer than I'd ever heard, almost hesitant. He wasn't demanding. He was asking permission. A small gesture, but it meant everything. I nodded, throat suddenly dry, heart fluttering strangely. He stepped inside, closing the door softly. He didn't approach immediately, walked to the large window, looking out at moonlight gardens, hands clasped behind his back. The air was thick with unspoken words, old wood polish, and the subtle, tantalizing hint of his cologne. I watched him, breath catching. This wasn't the ruthless boss, not entirely. This was the man who had trembled with fear when he thought I was harmed, the man who had subtly shifted his empire for me. He turned slowly, gaze finding mine across the room. Storm cloud eyes were soft, open, almost vulnerable. "When they took you," he began, voice low, raw. "I thought I would break." He paused, gaze dropping to his hands, then back to my face. "I've never felt fear like that, Lily. Not for myself, not for anything I own or my empire, only for you." My heart gave a painful lurch. To hear him admit such profound vulnerability, confess such depth of emotion, it was breathtaking, a chasm opening, revealing the fiercely guarded heart I'd only glimpsed. I realized in those hours that my world, the one I built, was empty without you in it. He took a step closer, then another, until he stood inches away. I could feel heat radiating from him, the sheer force of his presence. "I need you, Lily," he confessed, voice a whisper filled with aching sincerity. "Not as an assistant, not as a trophy, but as my equal, my partner. You make me better. You temper the darkness. You make me real." He reached out, hand trembling slightly, and gently cupped my cheek. His touch was feather-light, yet sent electricity straight through me. Rough texture of his skin against mine was exquisite. My gaze drifted to his lips, slightly parted, then back to his eyes, pleading intensity. All fear, all resentment slowly dissipated, replaced by fierce, undeniable love. This wasn't a simple love story. It was dark, complex, born of danger and power. But it was real, and it was ours. "I know your world, Lorenzo," I said, voice barely audible but firm. "It's brutal, it's dangerous, and I don't pretend it's not, but I've seen you in it. I've seen the man beneath the monster, the man who risks everything for those he cares about, the man who listens." My thumb instinctively stroked the back of his hand, and I think I love you too. Profound relief washed over his face, softening harsh jawlines. His eyes, those incredible storm clouds, shone with desperate hope, raw joy. "Lily," he breathed, voice thick with emotion. Then he leaned in slowly, deliberately. I mirrored the movement, eyes fluttering shut, heart pounding frantic rhythm against ribs. His lips met mine, soft at first, a hesitant feather-like touch, testing. Then, as I leaned in fully, deepening the kiss, his arms wrapped around my waist, pulling me flush against his hard, muscular body. His scent, intoxicating blend of bergamot, smoke, and something uniquely male, filled my senses, making my head spin. His mouth was warm, firm, demanding, utterly intoxicating. It wasn't just physical, it was a joining of souls, a declaration whispered on the deepest level. My hands went to his hair, clutching slick, soft strands at the nape of his neck, pulling him closer. His groan rumbled deep in his chest, vibrating through me. Every touch, every sensation was heightened, amplified. The world outside ceased to exist. There was only us, this moment, this profound illicit connection. He broke the kiss slowly, reluctantly, forehead resting against mine, breath mingling. His eyes, still shining with raw vulnerability, searched mine. "You are not just choosing me, Lily," he murmured, voice husky. "You are choosing this life. You are choosing the darkness. Are you certain?" His touch, gentle, was a physical question, a final offer of escape. I looked into his eyes, seeing fear there, the profound loneliness he'd carried so long. I felt rough texture of his suit jacket under my hands, steady beat of his heart against my own. I wasn't naive. I knew what this meant. It wouldn't be easy. It wouldn't be safe. But it would be real. "I am certain," I whispered, voice firm, unwavering. "I choose you, Lorenzo, and I choose to find my light within your darkness. Together." A genuine smile, slow, incredibly beautiful, spread across his face, reaching his eyes, banishing shadows that had always lurked there. He picked me up effortlessly, carrying me toward the bed. Silk sheets rustled as he laid me down gently. He followed, weight a welcome press against me. Our intimate union was a silent, powerful testament to the emotional bond we'd forged, a fusion of souls and bodies, the ultimate act of trust and acceptance in our shared, complicated world. The air was thick with joined breaths, with the new, undeniable promise of our future. Epilogue. Months later. Weeks melted into months. The estate transformed subtly. My presence wasn't just tolerated, it was integrated. I continued working alongside Lorenzo in the study, my suggestions openly considered, insights valued. I navigated the complex politics of his empire with newfound confidence, always grounded by my moral compass, always pushing for smarter, more enduring paths. The staff, initially wary, now treated me with quiet respect. My morning garden walks were no longer tense, but filled with blooming roses and a sense of belonging. Lorenzo's men still guarded me fiercely, but it felt less like captivity, more like protection, a visible sign of his unwavering commitment. One crisp autumn morning, sunlight streaming through tall study windows, Lorenzo and I stood side by side overlooking sprawling gardens. The air carried faint, earthy scent of fallen leaves and distant birdsong. He wore a charcoal suit, impeccably tailored. My hand rested lightly on his arm, soft wool warm beneath my fingers. He wasn't working. He was simply watching the world, expression serene. He turned to me, eyes wet slate warmed by morning sun, soft, completely open, no mask, no pretense, just the man, vulnerable and whole. He reached out, fingers tracing the curve of my jaw, thumb stroking my cheek. "Lily," he said, voice a low rumble filled with emotion that made my heart ache. "Do you remember the first night at the daily grind?" I smiled, genuine, soft, reaching my eyes. "How could I forget? You were infuriating and I slapped you." He chuckled, a deep resonant sound. "You did, and in that moment when your defiance blazed in your eyes, I thought, finally someone real." His gaze held mine, intense, possessive, but filled with overwhelming tenderness. "You saw me, Lily, truly saw me. Beyond the empire, beyond the monster they wanted me to be. And you didn't run. You stayed. You chose to be here." He intertwined our fingers, squeezing gently. "This is your home now, Lily. This is our empire. And you," he murmured, voice thick with devotion, "are my queen, my partner in everything, my light in the darkness." The words, so freely given, utterly sincere, filled the vast study, echoing with a promise as ancient and unshakable as the stone walls themselves. The scent of old books and his familiar cologne enveloped me. I leaned into him, resting my head against his shoulder, feeling solid strength. The warmth of his hand clasped in mine was constant reassurance. I was not a prisoner here. Not anymore. I was a choice. I had found my love, undeniable and fierce, in the heart of a man I once feared. And in doing so, I had found my own power, my own agency. Not by escaping the darkness, but by standing beside him, illuminating it. Knowing that by his side I was truly, finally, free.